Hey, everybody. Good morning. Good Monday morning. Welcome to KickASSery, and welcome to, I always do this backwards, John. Good morning, John. We are Dale and John Logan, and we are here to talk about some KickASSery stuff. What is KickASSery? KickASSery is kind of my investigation into the people in my life and those around me, or people who have influence, and how and why they kick ass. I mean, that's pretty much what KickASSery is. And I'm super stoked to have John on here again. He's a glutton. He hasn't figured it out that if he'd say no, it'd be okay. But this is where we're at, man. And so, John, welcome. Good morning.
Morning, Dale.
How's the weather up there in Idaho?
We had fog on Saturday, which is interesting. High arid mountain deserts usually don't accumulate much fog in January, but it was pretty cool. Saturday night looked like a Stephen King novel on Main Street. I mean, the whole bit, right? Like small town, flickering street lights, the whole thing was just set up to be uber creepy right out of a Stephen King novel. So
nice.
Yeah, other than that, it's good. Not too cold. Ice jam, which you're always concerned about, right? The ice jam on the river.
Yeah.
Not terribly bad yet. So we probably, if it's not bad yet, we'll keep our fingers crossed and probably
February. February is usually the hard.
But I don't live on the big flat, so it's okay.
You're one of those.
Yeah. Whatever. Somebody else.
It's so funny you talk about the fog. When we lived in Germany, real quick, so totally like off the path here. So when we lived in Germany, I've always wondered why, when you see in the movies, why are Germans always like dressed in grays and blacks? I always thought it was a cinematic piece. I always thought that was just kind of what the director and the writers did. No. In the wintertime, that's pretty much the only color that whole people wear, because they don't see the sun for like 3 months.
Yeah.
Because it is overcast and foggy all the time. It sucks. So, all right. So I had to tell John to shut his cake hole for a few minutes, because in our little chat that we had before we went live here, he started going off on something. I'm like, let's actually talk about that. And kind of the topic that we decided that we were going to talk about today is communication. I kind of talk about it a little bit. I know a little bit about communication. But our conversation that we had was dads and raising our little thing, children. That's the word I'm looking for. And John brought up the comment of, men, we kind of suck at talking. No, not talking, communicating.
Yeah,
communicating.
It's true.
So, all right, expand on that. So, unpause, play.
Okay, so the running joke with me is like, well, how do you feel? And well, I feel pain or I feel hungry, and that's it. That's the whole emotional box for John Logan. Either he hurts because he's getting old, or he's hungry all the time, right? So Dale and I were talking about our kids, and I had to shuffle one off and give it to mom, and he's got one in the corner because school's out today. And so I'm like, well, when I was a kid, or when I was younger and I've had my first two, I was going to write, I'm always thinking about writing. Most creative people are. I was going to write my kids' book. My advice book for first-time dads are, the 3-foot zombie and the 7-pound puke machine, because that's what I was in charge of with my first two boys, and the title page, the opening line was, if you don't think that's funny, this book isn't for you. And how do you communicate to first-time dads the experience of being a father, right? Because in one moment, in one event, your entire world has changed, and you need a whole new set of communication skills. You need a lot of new skills at the drop of a hat. But one of those skills is communicating with a kid as they grow and as they change. And then you have to keep updating that skill constantly. I don't talk to my 13-year-old the same way I talk to him even 6 months ago because he's changing so rapidly. His brain is going through its second largest growth spurt that it'll ever have. And so he is constantly absorbing new information. He's absorbing and learning new ways to communicate. And me, 36-year-old me has to try to keep up because my communication skill set is done. I've already gone through that. I'm stuck where I'm at unless I actively try to improve that skill set. And that's something I think a lot of people don't consciously think about. And I think that's a huge disconnect with the people around us. So yeah, Dale and I were going to talk about communications and communities being the other half there. Because I love looking at all the different communities people can become involved in. And without one, you can't have the other. So those were, Dale's like, oh, you get to pick. And I'm like, thanks, Dale. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. So what do you think?
You touched on something that you're like, okay, us guys, we suck at talking. We suck at communicating. And I feel that I don't 100% agree with that in just one little aspect is that I believe what you were kind of touching on at the beginning is communicating our feelings and communicating our thoughts well. And I agree with that. Traditionally, specifically where you and I grew up, guys, we don't talk about our feelings. We don't, that's stuff that is just not needed to be aired out, and something that has been a struggle for me my entire adult life is that I am a very emotional person. I really am. And looking back on it, my dad was a very emotional person as well. But he didn't know how to communicate those emotions. And so it came across as anger, bitterness. It came across as, I don't want to deal with your bullshit or whatever else. And by being introspective and then looking at that arc between, my dad's, how he was raised there in North Fork, the way I was raised in North Fork, the community, all those things, I feel that I am able to communicate those things so much better. But I have purposefully honed that skill. And I don't know if skill's the right word for it.
It is. Not. Yeah, no, I think it is. I'm with you that it is a skill that you need to work on every day if you can, or at least be aware of the larger skill set that people do employ when they communicate well. It's not just like, oh, I really enjoy talking to Dale. He's a swell guy. And he is. I enjoy talking to Dale because he's a great communicator. And this is why. He's expressive. He's an active listener. He does all of these things in this skill set very well, or at least he tries to. And that's part of the reason why it's so easy for us to talk is because we're aware that good communication takes effort.
It does. It does. The ear to mouth ratio is very important. And I don't succeed with that every time. You can ask my wife. And with all that said, though, is, when we're trying to communicate, and this is one of the things I try to teach a lot, and I try to instill in those around me and in my family, and now my 5-year-old daughter, is to be present. And I think that's a lot of, I know that was a lot of my challenge growing up, was being present, being right here. And you said listening. There's a difference between hearing and listening.
Oh, yeah.
I could hear what you say all day long, but I'm not taking any of it in. But if I'm listening to what you're saying, then I can respond accordingly because I'm processing it.
Right. And so I'm interested in, when you asked what I wanted to talk about, how do different communities communicate? They're very, like I said, I think they're like this. I truly believe that any community that you want to be a part of, or that you want to build yourself, which is super important to you and I at the moment, has a foundation of communication that will set the ceiling for where that community goes. If the communication is crap, that community is never going to get off the ground. If you have a culture of great communication, there is no limit to what that community can achieve. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing to watch, and watch it fail spectacularly. You know, you just get this, you just build this, you know, I've been a part of it. I've been a part of communities that, man, there's just no limit to what we can get done, whatever the goals are. And then it just turns into this flaming train wreck that dives off a trestle bridge. And you're like, what happened? And most of the time it's like, well, you had really bad communication. Either.
And I think there's two pieces in there that I took is culture. You know, that's the basis of the community, is the culture. What is the culture? And the other piece of that, though, also is leadership. You know, communication and leadership in the scenario that you just talked about, is that, you know, I've been with you, man. I've been in programs where it's like, oh my gosh, we have all the parts and pieces, we have everything that's needed. This thing should just go insane, but it never takes off. It kind of goes like this and goes, you know, whatever. And the leadership in these communities has to have good communication. And I think that that's the difference between leaders and managers. You know, leaders, I believe, in my experience, true leaders are good at communicating the intent, are good at communicating the vision and establishing that culture, whereas managers tend to have this, you're going to do this, here's the SOPs, here's your job description, do it.
Yep.
And then there's nothing else.
And a great guy to talk about this was your recent interview with Kirk, right? I mean, Absolutely. He had to figure that out from going to being a salesman in a manager position to being a leader in an organizational position. And Absolutely. It was great to see Kirk. Again, 4-H, the community of 4-H has a culture of great communication.
Yes.
So we made connections in that community that have lasted our entire lives.
Yes.
I know Kirk too. Again, way back, the last time I saw Kirk, I think it was 3:00. He was crashing at my house so he could go to Lost Trail the next day with his snowboard. And we stayed up playing Killer Instinct on my TV, which was a big deal. I didn't have video games. I wasn't a gamer yet in my house, but Kirk had Killer Instinct. And not only did Kirk have Killer Instinct, he had an arcade stick, like the full-blown deal, right? And so we're sitting there just mashing the hell out of this arcade stick, and my dad gets us up at 6 a.m. so we could go skiing the next day. And he's like, what was that noise? Like, I'm like, well, you know. Anyway, so yeah, and so it's really interesting that those have lasted. Mm-hmm. And the other one I watched recently was Michelle Jakovac. And again, there's a connection through a community that had great communication. And so I've wanted to ask, is it just you know, scraping the bottom of the barrel with people you know to get these interviews done? Or how did you decide to come after people like me and people like Kirk and people like Michelle? It's really interesting that the connections you've decided to reach out and highlight during this series are phenomenal to me. It's just been awesome. I think it's the definition of eclectic.
You know, and I appreciate you asking that question. So, because I've been asking this question as well. This is a cross section of my relationships. I have been since high school kind of a gecko of sorts when it comes to relationships, because I can get along with pretty much anyone. And that goes back to my conversational abilities, which comes back to communication. And of course, 4-H, opening my heart, my mind to not be cliquish, even though we still have that human tendency. And so to truly answer your question, I went through and here, where to go? Here's my list right here of people. And I just sat down and I just thought, okay, who do I know? One, kicks ass, and two, won't say no. All right, that's pretty important, you know. And three is I have to take in consideration almost the entertainment factor of this medium, right? And who would, even if they're nervous as heck, like Michelle told me no. She said, no, I'm not doing it. And I'm like, oh, you think you had a choice. And, you know, I got her on and she was, I mean, literally for like a week and a half, we were communicating back and forth. Matt Lamont was another one that we were communicating back and forth. He's like, and she was like, I'm like, listen, it's just a BS session. We're just talking. I'm going to ask you some questions. We're going to talk. This is not a formal interview series. That's not what I want this to be. I want this to be John and I sitting down and he throws something on the wall and we're going to BS about it for a minute or two. And then a shiny squirrel's going to walk through the kitchen and we're going to chase it for a minute. And that, because here's the thing, that's how conversation goes. Yeah. That's how chats go. And there's nothing scripted about this. No. Absolutely nothing. You know, and this is a chat series. This is us chatting. This is us BSing. This is what I grew up doing with adults because I didn't have kids my own age. So I grew up having BS sessions and chats and talks with my grandparents' age people. And that's how I've become so good at just conversation. That's a really long answer to your question.
Yeah,
but,
right. No, but it's a good answer. It's because, again, here's a community that is not defined by geography, which is everybody's go-to community definition is my town, my street, my neighborhood, my, Gerson Creek, Bohannon Creek, whatever it is. This is my community. It defined geographically. But with technology, you say this all the time, technology, this, we can do anything we want now, has really redefined what communities can be. I've made friendships and long-standing relationships with people I have still yet to meet face-to-face, simply over the computer, for whatever reason. Most of mine is I video game with these people, and then a deeper relationship comes out of that, and now these people are my friends. But it's really, really fantastic and really interesting to watch that change in what community means.
Absolutely.
And to just take geography and throw it out the window as being a limiting factor, because it used to be a limiting factor and it's not anymore at all. Mm-hmm.
And here's a great case in point. In about 2 weeks, I'm going to be on, get this, I'm going to be on somebody else's show in about 2 weeks. 2.5 weeks. I'm going to be on, her name's Rhonda Boyle, and she is I guess a master coach for the Gallup Strength Finders program. And as a matter of fact, she just put on, that's funny. Sorry, my Facebook popped up and it was Rhonda. That's just creepy. But how I got associated with her was that my buddy John Mayhew that I had on here in December, he's like, we were chatting a little bit, and he's like, hey, have you done the Strength Finders? I was like, I did it years and years ago. I don't remember anything about it. He's like, hey, I'm going to connect you with Rhonda. Well, I've been kind of pseudo following Rhonda for a couple of years anyway. So she reached out. We started doing our la. And I'm like, hey, you probably know this person. Yeah, I know that person. And you probably know this person too, Rhonda. She's like, yeah, I know that person. I said, do you know Jennifer Quinn out of Boise, Idaho? And she's like, yeah, I met her at an event in Vegas last year. And I'm like, that right there is what it's awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But now here's something. Okay, so let's take this for a spin. So yesterday, my wife and I day before yesterday, had a very serious conversation about Bolicite. Now we're talking about communities. We're talking about communication, and we're talking about how this digital format has given us an amazing opportunity to connect and talk. But every community has a dark side. Every community has something that's not super stellar. I don't care what community you're in, if it's digital or physical or whatever. And so it's unfortunate, but it's also very, very interesting how we went from when we were kids, we had zero technology, to now our kids have all the technology in the world on their phone, right? I mean, this is a supercomputer, really, and the issue of bullicide and everything that comes along with that. So let me ask you, being a really smart guy that knows probably a hell of a lot more than I do about a lot of stuff, is how do we balance that then? How do we take the absolute amazingness of this and this very negative aspect, communications? What do we do with this?
That's really interesting, because again, I'm a gamer, right? Like that's one of the qualifications I have to speak to the people I speak to, is I've been in that community. I've played video games on an hourly rate enough that they qualified for a second job at one point in my life. I'd get home and I'd sit down, and I had a community I was involved with, and I would sit down for 6-8 hours at a time after I got home from work and do nothing but interact with these people over a digital format. So I can talk about it because I was invested in it long enough to become knowledgeable about it, and that's really all it takes. So anybody who doubts their ability to speak to other people, really don't worry about, oh, I've got a shiny piece of paper here on the wall that tells me I'm good enough to talk about this. That's not the limiting factor on if you should try to share the knowledge you have up here.
Right.
But back to this other part, it's funny how some of the oldest lessons that are taught are still are true and taught and retaught and taught and retaught for a reason. And the lesson that applies here is everything in moderation, right? And again, I've been on the very outer limit of, should I brush my teeth and take a shower? Or should I sit here and play video games for another hour before I go to bed and then go to work tomorrow on 4 hours of sleep without doing any of that personal care stuff? How do you balance that? Well, take a step back and take everything in moderation is a huge stumbling block for a lot of people. And it's not just recreation. You can work yourself to death. I've seen it. It a lot in Salmon, Idaho. What do you get for working 40 years as a ditch digger? You get crippled. Right. That's it. Like, you've killed yourself working a thankless job your entire life. What do you have to show for it? Nothing from that job. You might have a great life. You might have provided for your family in such a way that they honor that and they respect that and they're very grateful for that. So you have great family ties because you killed yourself at your job 50, 60 hours a week, but you didn't get anything out of the job for it. Right. So you take a moment and be like, yes, I need to do this to achieve some sort of goal for me, whether it's a financial goal or whether it's a mental health goal. I play video games for a break. I'm at the grindstone all day. I'm parenting. I'm coaching soccer. I'm doing this, that. I want to get home. I want to take an hour and just chill in some useless video game that has no consequences and is fun and I get a kick out of it. That's great for me. But if I get home from soccer and I don't feed my kids and I tell them to, get the hell out of here and get off my TV, and I'm not good about my communication at that time, then there's a problem. And I hope I have the presence to be like, whoa, wait a minute.
Well, and that's part of what community comes into as well, is holding each other accountable and keeping track of each other. And, whether you call it friendship, you call it family, you call it whatever. And I think you touched on something that's very interesting is, okay, we're talking about moderation. Now, in the instance where your community, your life, your reality, and I'm not saying this tongue in cheek, I'm saying it legitimately, is through this virtual media community, and that is your life. There's a lot of careers that are 100% the computer, and that's all you do, and that is how you reach out to your Snapchats and your Instagrams and all these social media things, and that's how you find your significant other and whatnot. So how do we as parents, let's flip this around full circle, how do we as parents then say, okay, this is legitimate, this there's careers, there's lots of money being made in these mediums and all these things. I'm spending way more time on this computer in the last month and a half than I have in a very, very long time. So how do we educate our children about that balance?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, where is it? Here it is, because it's never far, right? These, I'm on it all the time. I'm talking to my mom on it. I'm talking to my sister, my brother. I keep track of, 4 out of 5 of my immediate family I communicate with this.
Absolutely.
But my kids are like, hey, when do I get a smartphone? I'm like, when you can drive, like you don't get your own phone until you're driving a car, and I need to be able to communicate, or you need to be able to communicate in the case of an emergency. That's a rule I've set up, and I look around, and that's not a standard rule by any means now, and I've talked to other parents about it, other parents whose kids already have phones and they're my children's age. They're like, well, we just gave it to him because he wouldn't stop nagging. And I'm like, well, that's a choice. Or they're involved in other stuff, and we need to be able to communicate them where your kid's not yet. And so it's really interesting because leading by example isn't really the golden rule anymore. I'm on my phone all the time, yet I feel very hypocritical when I look at my kid and been like, nope. It's like, and it looks hypocritical. So I have to then explain to my children, this is why, because it's not safe, because there are people out there who have no accountability in these communities. And that's terrifying because it just is. It's really there. Like you said, each and every community has the possibility to carry along a reverse side of that coin. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I enjoy the hell out of Batman, but he's got really bad villains hanging out with him, you have to be aware of that. And you have to sit down and be like, look, we're going to communicate for a minute about some very serious things. And, it's worse for you because, you're this tender-hearted kid who's got his life on his heart on his sleeve, and they're going to come at you because you're a target. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't worry about my oldest kid that way. He doesn't care. He'll just shut him out. My middle child will be crushed. He'll just be crushed. And so each and every time I have to approach this from a different angle because it's an individual thing. Mm-hmm. And it works the same way for adults. When they encounter something in the world of communication that they don't understand or they don't have experience with, it can be really a setback for them to try to engage further in achieving a goal in that area. So right. That's where people like you come in, Dale, because you have all this knowledge about communication and you can offer it and put it out there as education. And I think the way we learn is also changing because of technology. I think very quickly this sort of format will be one of the highest learning platforms there is, rather than going to a brick and mortar school in Bozeman or Boise or whatever and getting that shiny piece of paper on the wall that says, I know this. Pretty soon, I think we're going to come, it's really strange, a full circle to where self-education mm-hmm. is set again at a standard with formal education.
Well, that paradigm, that pendulum is already swinging. And it's been swinging for probably the last 10 years.
Which is why you can't shut your kids out of this world. You can't tell them, no, you will not. No, you will not. You will grow up the same exact way I did. You will not have a TV. You will not have a video game system. You're not doing your kid, in my opinion, you're not doing your kid any favors by keeping them in the dark about this entire world that is being built as they're around. It's
whether we like it or not, this is the way
it's true. It's true.
Whether we like it or not. YouTube is a perfect example. You can learn pretty damn near anything you ever wanted to learn on YouTube, period.
Yep.
I go to YouTube weekly to learn things. I had a plumbing issue yesterday, and I ran into a snafu. I'm like, the hell am I doing wrong? YouTube on my phone as I'm standing on a ladder looking up in the ceiling. I'm like, oh, okay. Stuck my phone, fixed it. It was all good,
Yeah, it's really cool. And that should be exciting. People should be excited about that. But like Matt said, there are a whole group of people terribly resistant to the idea. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, if I can provide the service to get you on board, I'm making the world a better place.
Amen. Amen. And so I want to rewind just a touch. You were talking about your kids not having a phone until they're 16, and yet this is how communication is the basis of communication right now is this. Let's just be honest. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, here's what I find interesting is that when you and I were kids, they didn't call it bullying back then. We just got picked on. I got picked on relentlessly. I was a soft-hearted kid, easy to make me cry. So I was the scapegoat a lot, especially up at our tiny little private school. And so if anybody had a bad day, okay, let's go pick on Dale. Let's make him cry. I feel better about myself. And then we move on with our day.
Yeah. And
I'm not bitching. That's just the way it was. On the school bus, the same way. Riding on the school bus home, I had about, 40-minute, half an hour, 40-minute bus ride home. Okay, well, I'm going to go thump on Dale real quick, kind of a deal. But the thing is when I got off the school bus, it was gone. I didn't have to talk to him. There was no social media. There was nobody else. It was done. It was hands washed. I didn't have to deal with it until the next morning when I got back on the school bus. Now, because of these in our pockets all the time, it's never ending. It never ceases. So when something happens, and let's transfer this to adulthood as well. Something happens at work. We piss in somebody's Cheerios, whatever the case may be, these things happen. And guess what? It used to be when I left work, I didn't have to worry about Jane talking crap about whatever. Now it's here as well. And it's here as well. And it's here as well. It's almost impossible for a lot of us who rely so much on this digital medium as part of our personal communities to get away from it.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to, I don't know who said it, but the internet is the first invention that man didn't understand when he invented it, right? We invented the car. We invented the car. We knew what the car was going to do. It was going to facilitate travel from A to B in a better way. Same with phones. We understood exactly what the telephone would do. You could pick it up and you could talk to somebody you could not see. That was revolutionary. Even the space shuttle, as crazy as the space shuttle was, it had a very set definition of what this would do once we got it working. Uh-huh. The internet has no such definition, and it's really confusing for a lot of people because of that. It truly is the first invention where we had no idea what it was capable of when we turned it on, right? Toasters toast things. I know what this invention does. The internet, I turned it on, and now I don't know where the limits are. I don't know where the boundaries are. I don't know where the accountability is. To look at the car, we set up accountability very quickly in the car. If you drive recklessly, you're going to get in trouble, whether that's speeding, whether that's driving under the influence. There's accountability built in to that invention by society. We have failed miserably as a society to build that accountability in to the internet. And
there's accountability. They're called social justice warriors.
No, please stop. And that's really interesting because that is a huge failure in communication. Yeah. When somebody just flips out and spits their coffee all over their keyboard because they're in such a hurry to sit down and correct somebody. It's just like, whoa, you are communicating in the poorest way possible.
But John, that's my First Amendment right.
You're right. You are correct.
I have every right to tell you that the glare on your glasses is upsetting and it's disturbing, and I don't like it for the plethora of reasons that I can't even spell correctly.
That's glassophobic, and you should be ashamed.
I'm a glassophobia. Holic.
Ocular impairment phobe.
Yeah, 4 eyes. Anyway.
But now where were we? Where were we, Dale? Where did you?
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
But no, that's a brilliant point in the framework of digital communication that loses so much of the skill set that communication is built on. Mm-hmm. And maybe you know something about body language and how the fact that it's not present when you type on your keyboard,
right,
makes communicating via internet or text messaging absolutely the worst thing ever. Like when people talk to me over text messaging and there's not that 70% of communication that's dealt through nonverbal cues, right? This is the terminology, is that 70% of our communication comes from nonverbal communication. However, none of that is present when you're typing. So
that's why we have emojis.
And grammar Nazis.
Yeah.
Which are also not doing their part, right? Because really, I feel like we could maybe solve some of the world's issues if we could just get the grammar Nazis to just go after the social justice warriors and leave the rest of us alone. It's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like, stop.
You know what? He said something about your mom, and so you should, I don't know.
But he didn't use an Oxford comma while doing it, so get him.
Bastards.
Get him.
I don't even know what that means, but bastards. You know, you're absolutely right. And what it comes down to is there's been study upon study upon study on, and this started with emails, you know, back in the 80s. You know, it started with emailing in the 80s and how there's an immense amount of misinformation and misunderstandings. And, you know, one of the things when I start talking about the body language is intention and perception. You know, what I'm trying to intend to say or get across, or the feelings or whatever it is, and how it's being perceived. That's huge. But when it is a speech only medium without, and I'm not a great writer, so all of these commas and exclamation points and stuff, I'm putting them in the wrong places anyway. And if you're one of my aunts, you type in capital letters all the time, so you're screaming at everyone, then that intention and perception is lost, and it's really hard. And anymore, it's fun, John. It's so weird for me to say this next sentence out loud. So weird to me. But being that people are watching more of what I'm doing, I am being more conscious about the text in which I am writing now. So I'm going back and I'm rereading crap and I'm trying to figure this out. I'm like, okay, is that supposed to be a period or a comma, or, you know, and I'm trying. I'm being cognizant of it, you know, and especially with my texts, dude. I almost always reread my texts because for one reason, I don't want to rewrite it. I don't want to go back and having to re-explain. They're like, I'll write something, and then an hour later, someone blowing me up like, you're an asshole. For what? You know, I look back, I'm like, oh, yes, you are correct. That no bueno, you know? So to try to avoid all that, I'm usually rereading my texts, you know? I got a buddy who does voice to text when he's texting. Yeah, he needs to stop doing that because he has enough of an accent. He's from the South enough that it doesn't come across right. And I have to check myself because I'll quick read it. I'm like, what the heck? Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, and to me it's just fascinating. I love it. I love watching communities. I find them fascinating. So that's a big deal to me when it's something as simple, right? It's something as simple, which is extremely complicated, but it's something as simple as the communication that, you fix that, you've got what you wanted. You don't fix it, and it turns into a train wreck. So yeah, I find it super interesting, and there's been studies done. One of the coolest studies I've ever read was an anthropologist who traveled to the Utah salt flats to watch the salt flat racers who gather there once a year for the speed trials. Well, that's a micro community. These are people from all over the world, all walks of life, investment bankers, Fortune 500 guys who are speed freaks, all the way down to
grease monkeys.
Grease monkeys, mom and pop grease monkeys who are building this shit, in their garage or in their living room, right? Like I hauled this Harley and it's been sitting in my kitchen while I'm getting it ready for the speed trials. But they all come together with none of those superficial society boundaries playing any part of them in their interaction while they're at the speed flats. And it's fascinating to me. And the fact that is a real world micro community, but you can take those lessons with a little bit of self-education and passion. You can take those lessons and apply them to any micro community, which is where you and I are at. I want to start a micro community based around comic books and the education and enlightenment and entertainment value that comic books have. And you want to do it with body language, and you want to do it with, interpersonal connections that you have, and many hands make light work. The tide rises many boats. That one's I don't quite have right there, but so yeah, it's really interesting to me. That's one of my deals. It's a thing.
And what you're saying is that each one of these micro communities have a commonality. They have a common interest that is very driving for them personally. So they're able to let go of the societal chasms between the classes of people and the industries and the this and the that, and it goes to skiers and snowboarders, it goes to rodeo kids, it goes to 4-H kids, it goes anything, video games, I'm sure that you interact with people of all walks of life when you're on chatting and playing your whatever. Right?
It's really cool. Yeah. And you never know. It's one of those things where the community becomes the great equalizer. One of my favorite quotes about billiard tables or the game of billiards is the pool table is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter. It's your skill at the table that you will be judged on by other enthusiasts. And that's sort of the same thing in any micro community. What are you bringing to my community? And that will be the first basis of how that community accepts you, how you are interacted with. And if you suck at it, whatever the specialized community is looking for, then you better, if you're a noob, right? I'm not bringing anything to the table. I'm a total noob at this. I need to compensate. Is it my personality that'll get me in the door? Is it my connections that get me in the door? Is it this $1 million face that gets me in the door? What is it that my taste in hats? What is it that I can provide to that community until I am accepted by it? So
well, and you want to talk about an interesting. Okay, let's take that and go from micro to macro. Is Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that a lot in the macro sense of the business market. Okay, so the business market as a whole is probably one of the biggest macro environments there is. Yet inside of that are niches and micro niches. But the thing that he talks about all the time is the market doesn't give a shit who you are, where you come from, what color you are, what language you speak. The market doesn't care. It doesn't. So the market in business is the billiards table.
Yeah.
It's the equalizer. The market doesn't care. And that's something that I had to figure out myself was, are they going to love me? Are they going to accept me? Are they going to It doesn't matter. I need to put on my underwear and my pants and my shoes and my shirt and just go do it and then prove to the market, like you were just saying, prove to the market that I'm worth something and that I can bring something to the table, pun intended. So that, when I'm at the billiards table, when I'm in the market, when I'm wherever, then I have value that now is quantifiable. So
yeah, it's and it just goes on and on. Like this is you can look at any one part of this and then go 100 different directions.
Absolutely.
And there you can just branch out again. It's so
absolutely.
That's why I find it super fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because at what point, just to flip it, you said it doesn't matter. But at what point do we have to be like, there is a human side? There is a human side. If I, like this morning, if I would have shown up, in a hoodie, or, if I didn't take the time to try at all with the human interaction part, does it matter what my knowledge base is? It doesn't matter my value if I am absolutely undesirable as a human being. Like, eventually you just go with option B, right? Like, if option A is the expert, but he's an asshole, and option B is somebody you can work with and somebody you can get along with and somebody who puts effort in, pretty soon, it won't take very long before the expert has lost his niche to option B, because option B is better at the other parts, even if he's not quite as technically sound as option A. If he's just a better guy to be around and ask my questions and he provides better customer service, then I'll, and that happens in salmon all the time. I will buy locally for more money to get personal interaction that I enjoy, rather than dealing with the faceless, nameless internet to save $2. I will go buy my starter down at Napa and say hi to all the guys at Napa and BS with them about my old Ford pickup and buy my starter locally and feel good about that. Mm-hmm. Or I can buy it off of eBay and, it gets shipped to Zimbabwe and I pay extra fees and it shows up all smashed. And, then what have I done? Nothing productive. So there is a flip side. The value to the market says eBay is successful, says selling things at a discount because you don't have any brick and mortar overhead is a viable business model. And look how successful it is. But at the same time, you don't use it every time because you need the human interaction. Not only did I buy my starter, he came out and looked at it and told me where the nuts and bolts go, and it made the whole process much easier.
So you're talking about two markets right there. You're talking about two markets. You're talking about your home market on products and services that you, as being part of that market, values the service, the face-to-face service. Then Amazon is supporting the market in which either A, you don't have access to locally, B, there's no experts locally that you can have that, or C, there is such a cost difference that it just doesn't make feasible. It's not being frugal.
Yeah.
And so the way I look at that is that there's two markets we're discussing at the moment.
That's interesting. So but there is a difference, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm always wrong. There is a difference between Garage A and Garage B. I need my starter fixed. Garage A will do it cheaper. Garage B will do it better. There's a difference there.
Yeah.
So, even if the prices are exactly the same, Garage A and Garage B provide the same exact services in the same exact time. One's a jerk face, one's a great guy.
Right.
Then you're going with the great guy every single time.
Right. Am I still on?
Mine says green. Oh, well, it's been a nice talk, Dale. Mine says live. Comment if you can hear us.
Can you see me?
Oh, look, I can see you. Yes.
Okay. My
How long-
broadcast window just went blank on mine though.
Oh, well, it was a good
Interesting.
It was a good 52-minute run, Dale.
Well, okay, so I do want to answer that question, whether I'm on here or not. So
Okay, perfect.
I do want to answer that question, and I think that Michelle,
Michelle says yes.
We're good. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so that goes into there's some psychology with that. There's some blah 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 blah. And my answer to that is this: quality and quantity, price versus am I only looking at price? Because now I'm going back into my sales mode. So if I'm selling you everything based on price, am I building a relationship with you? Or am I selling you what you need at the quality you want? So that has always been my sales mode is, okay, John, let's take starters. We're talking starters. All right, John. All right, what do you need? All right, I need and want, right? Need and want. I need a starter for my 79 Ford pickup. Okay. Now, what do you want? Here's your options. And I'm going to listen to your wants. Well, I want it gold plated because this is a show truck, and I want it to make me breakfast in the morning. I like eggs and bacon, and I want these things, right? Okay, awesome. What's your budget? Well, I have a budget of $100. Okay, so if you want the gold plated starter that makes you eggs and bacon in the morning, that's $10,000. Well, that's not in the budget. Awesome. Okay, but we do have this one that will fit your need for $89.95. Okay, now what did I just do? I offered him the opportunity to buy it at what he wanted, but I educated, I listened. You talked about this already. I listened. I tried to do what I could for him, but at the end of the day, he still ended up having to get the cheap or inexpensive version of the same thing. And we all walk out the door and we're all happy.
Yeah. And cheap and inexpensive are subjective. And that's something you have to keep in mind when dealing with people.
I don't think it's a subjective. Personally, I don't think cheap and inexpensive are subjective. Cheap is cheap. It is the lowest cost item at the lowest, usually productive value there is, whereas inexpensive means that it has a higher quality and yet it's less expensive than the top of the line stuff. That's the way I look at cheap versus inexpensive. Cheap usually means it's cheap. It's going to fall apart. It's not going to be quality. It's you're buying it.
Okay, because, yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy that lexiconical difference there.
I'm sorry, use the word that I don't understand.
Cheap and inexpensive are not the same thing. It's like smart and intelligent.
No, I'm not intelligent. No, I'm smart ass, but I'm not intelligent.
Well, is intelligence defined as what you know or your ability to learn?
I feel that
because your ability to learn has been proven to be above average.
Which makes me smart. That's what I look at it. Intelligence to me is higher level complex thinking. Zach Dupree, intelligence. Versus smart is figuring out how to find out the information to get you to where you need to be. Is the way I look at it. Smarts versus intelligence. My wife, very, very intelligent. My wife, many degrees. She has more letters behind her name than in front of her name now. Very, very intelligent. I'm not saying she's not smart because she's a farm girl, so she can figure it out as well. Myself, I don't see myself intelligence like her, but I can give me an hour and I can figure most anything out.
Sweet. Good job there. Yeah.
I win.
But it matters. Like and not so much with smart and intelligent, but if you're using words that might have a negative connotation and there's a slight difference there, that's a communication thing. Yeah. Don't call me dumb or don't call me ignorant. Call me, something else. They're like, or maybe I am ignorant, but I'm not stupid, right? You are ignorant of this rule set that will affect your life. but you're not stupid. You can figure this out.
Well, and I think part of the communication gap as well, brother, and we need to cut this off here in a minute, but I think part of that also is I think we just showed a difference of definition in terms.
Yeah.
You know, and so our communication broke down for a few moments, but we're open enough to listen to how the other one defines X.
Yeah.
And was able, perfect example, punk. I used to use the word punk all the time. What's up, punk? Until I worked with a guy down in Boise that had been in prison. And I said, "What's up, punk?" And he about laid me out. Like immediately. I mean, he was on fire all of a sudden. I was like, "Whoa, what?" He's like, "You will never," I mean, he was in my face like, "You will never call me a punk." I'm like, "Why? I don't understand." Well, that's a prison term.
Yeah.
For, and I'm not going to get into it. It's not a very, very good prison term at all. And so I learned that one real quick. I was like, "Oh, okay." So I changed my terminology quite quickly because I didn't want to end up being a grease spot. So
yeah,
anyway,
and that's a whole chat right there. Is that in itself? Because in my
Gesundheit.
Thanks. Don't do it, doggo. Sorry, my dogs are about to like light out and bark at something that I'm not sure what.
There he goes.
Perfect. All right, with that, I gotta go chase my hounds down. Thank you, Dale.
Dude, thanks, man. I appreciate you, brother.
I don't know what they're doing. Somebody knocked on the other door in the house. Well, it's harmless. Anyway, best laid plans. We almost did it.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up because you and I are going to get on to another subject, and then we'll go for another hour, and then everybody's going to be like, "Are you guys done yet? This is ridiculous."
Well, that's really interesting. That's what I wanted to say. For anybody who bothers to get up with Dale and I, because I have to accommodate my schedule by doing these kind of early in the morning, at least for now, at least on Mondays. Please comment. Like like Michelle's commented a couple times, but I encourage everybody. And I'm going to say Dale likes it too. I don't know, maybe not. But certainly when I do a Facebook Live, I want that interaction. I crave it. It's validation for what we're doing here. So at any point, like there's no tangent that Dale and I won't latch onto and give it a good shake. So if you're ever like, "Oh, wait, go back and talk about this," or, "Oh, wait, I thought of something," or, just, again, throw it at the wall, see if it sticks. We'll chase it down for you guys. So it's one of the greatest things I enjoy about talking with Dale is the fact that we can talk about just about anything. And the conversational drift is so good with us. And conversational drift is its own chat too. And something I really think Dale should tackle because, again, it's a subset of communication that not enough people understand. And it is so painful to deal with those people that I need Dale to educate them for me because they just make me want to chew glass. But Dale, educate these poor masses. Educate these.
Okay. All right. That's our next chat. We're going to talk about conversations. We're going to jump in, and we talk about communication today. So the next, what I want to know from everybody: do we want to do this weekly, John? Do we want to have like a weekly thing?
Absolutely, I do.
And tackle all of the problems of the world. Yeah,
right. The multiverse.
There you go.
Tackle them all.
Multiverse, dude. I can't even handle my verse.
You got to get on that though.
So
it's really exciting.
All right, everybody, let's wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with KickASSery today. I've been hanging out here with John. What a great guy, John. I really appreciate you, man. I really do. Thanks for getting up a little early for me today and shuffling the kid off to the corner for everybody. But what is KickASSery? I want to wrap this up. This week is just jam-packed, guys. Bear with me. I've got like 6 of these this week because I kind of messed up my schedule a little bit and opened it up and everybody went into the pool. So we're going to have a lot of this. You're going to get kind of sick of this probably, but I don't really care because I'm having a blast. This is getting me up in the mornings. And I'm actually getting some requests for people who I don't know who are kind of like, well, what about this and what about that? Jump in. like John said, comment, get on here. Michelle, thank you very much for hanging out with us and listening to us blab this morning. And John and I are going to work out a constant schedule. I think this is going to be something
awesome.
that would be a lot of fun to do for.
Yeah, we didn't have a technical hiccup. You did, but I don't think it was actually a hiccup.
I think it's just on my end, and because Michelle said it was working just fine. So,
perfect,
all right, guys.
I'm down.
John,
see you, Dale. Have a great week.
John, do me a favor. In the comments, write how we get a hold of you and like your museum information, your comic information, and all that jazz. So,
yeah, those two areas that we still haven't talked about. But yes, I'll put them down. And those will be exciting things to talk about as we march forward.
Yep, absolutely. All right, John, have an awesome day. Everybody else keep smiling because guess what? Somebody needs it. Talk to you soon.